They're hunting witches again. Still, still. I don't know how to word that sentence. The point is, it's happening again. Calls for witch hunts have come out, and as somebody who's tired of this cycle repeating itself over and over again, it looks like the Satanic Panic is trying to make a comeback, baby. And now they're actually coming for witches again, maybe still in a couple communities around the country. And I think that we need to be mindful of these challenges that are starting to come our way because we can't let it get bad again. So let's talk about modern day witch hunts today as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan Druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan Druid and sous chef to the Dogda.
We're going to be talking about modern day witch hunts, and two in particular, one that happened for very truly petty reasons, and one strange one that's currently going on in the Carolinas, and looking into what else going on with that. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever the app is you are listening to us on. We do 5 original Christopagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday, and you don't want to miss a thing. Now, I'm going to let you all know right now, this is apparently a surprise to people, and our accents don't give it away. We are from the United States, and so our content tends to focus thereabouts because we have more connection to what is going on closest to us. If events like this are happening in your neck of the woods, somewhere else around the world, please let us know and we will report on that too. The article that I am looking at right now is from Wild Hunt News, and I've actually found a couple different sources. I picked this one because it is actually coming from a pagan perspective. I felt like it did a good job of summarizing all of the different aspects into one article. All right. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning here. There's just the opening paragraph because it sets the tone quite nicely. So Manny Moreno writes, Pickens, South Carolina. Since Friday, February 21st, 2025, TWH has been receiving reports regarding an incident, the market on the mill in Pickens, South Carolina. Initially, concerns circulated on social media about claims that Stillwater Christian Fellowship is actively targeting the local pagan and witchcraft community. According to the posts from numerous individuals, Stillwater engaged in confrontation during a local market event. Reports allege that at least one vendor and then one supportive individual were harassed, with members of the community condemning them to hell while citing Exodus 22:18 as justification. Exodus 22:18 is the infamous and likely mistranslated verse, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Okay, so let's start with the Bible verse first, because we've talked about this before, but I think it bears repeating because you can't point out when people are being done with the Bible enough. One, the concept of witches and witchcraft did not exist until the late Middle Ages. Anytime you see the term witch or witchcraft being used in anything that claims to be older than the late Middle Ages, so say the 1300s and on, they're lying to you, or they're translating a word that is not witch to be witch. Now, there have always been in-group and out-group magical users. So there have always been the approved form of magic that we use one word for, and the disapproved form of magic that we use another word for. And what typically happens is that disapproved group gets translated into English as witch. Now, we brought up
is a Hellenistic plot. It's the Greeks, and why Westerners often view any Eastern spiritual practices as witchcraft and thus evil has to do with the Greeks having issues with the Persians.
So we can talk about this in more detail later. We put forward the idea of maybe doing a deep dive series into the witch cult of Europe, which, by the way, never existed. It was Christian propaganda to persecute women and other people, and with women and Jews and other outgroups that they wanted to seize their property and money from. So when I talk about the witch cult of Europe, I'm not talking about pagans at all. Pagans did not come into the picture at all until the 20th century, when pagan groups started reclaiming the word witch for themselves.
Yeah, we are actually talking about female entrepreneurship, successful female entrepreneurship, the male leadership of the time seizing their assets, their property,
Yeah.
and oftentimes executing them in efforts to seize it.
Yes. So right off the bat, this should never say "suffer not a witch to live." It would still be inaccurate to say "suffer not a sorceress to live," or sorcerer or wizard. None of these words really work here, mainly because the word that actually exists here in the Hebrew, we do not know what it means. It probably meant a snake priestess, somebody who either performed magic with serpents or used serpents for divination or something. It definitely is connected to the word snake, but what it means, we do not know. It is something that has been lost to us in time. We do know that there were many ancient practices that used serpents, and they are various and different. Honestly, they could be talking about American. You could apply this to an American snake handler more than you could to a pagan witch. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Because then at least you're in the right ballpark. We do not know what this is talking about at all. And it's really interesting to read both the Christian and the rabbinical literature on this as people speculate wildly.
Yeah, because you got to think, so this is in Exodus, right? You
Yes.
have earlier in the Exodus story, Moses going toe to toe using magic against other magic practitioners. They don't even use the same words there.
They do
And
snake magic.
they do snake magic, but if my
Yes.
is correct, it's not even the same word.
No, it is.
And so they're not even talking about that kind of snake magic.
It is my understanding that outside of commentaries on this passage, this is the only time we have this word written down.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to reference that, because that is in the same book.
Yeah. So continuing back to the article, yes, this was taken completely out of context. The location was later verified. On February 15th, 2025, a vendor at the Market on the Mill, a venue known for hosting local businesses, boutiques, antiques, and flea market items, was allegedly targeted by Stillwater members for their participation. The vendor was reportedly Wiccan and selling witchcraft materials and tools. I want to skip a little bit further down. So on February 18th, Pastor Barry Vaughn, I'm kind of summarizing here a little bit, posted a sermon to their YouTube channel, to Stillwater's YouTube channel, titled Witches Be Crazy with Pastor Barry Vaughn, where he goes into this verse and encourages his congregation to act up. And if I can, I'm going to start reading a little bit lower in the article following, which of course went over super well, right? Pastor Barry Vaughn and Hardin discussed a recent witchcraft festival in Pickens and their efforts to evangelize at the event. Vaughn confirms his presence and states that he and others initially protested outside the venue, later entering the facility before being told to leave. Following the backlash, Stillwater Christian Fellowship escalated its response through sermons, podcasts, and videos. Members called on pastors to chase the wolves out, a phrase that critics argue refers to witches, LA plus individuals, and abortion rights supporters. Okay, so this is most of what I'm going to read from the article. We will do our best to link the article in the show notes for those of you who want to read the article in full. They do a very good job putting together all of the pieces of this story. Now, here's what I want to say about this and why I wanted to bring it up. This is not the first time that this has happened in recent memory. Pastor Greg Locke in Southern Illinois, a couple years ago, actually led a witch hunt at his local church. If you remember, I said for the pettiest of reasons. The reasons that he gave for this was that witches had infiltrated his wife's Bible study and he was going to out them. What it turned out was happening is people were questioning how he had stopped preaching the gospel. People were starting to question what he was doing with all the money they were raising. And he responded to that by calling the people who were questioning him witches, threatening them with violence if they did not leave the church. It is my understanding that no violence actually occurred in that case either. So far as I've been able to keep up to date with this South Carolina case, no actual violence has happened other than protests and harsh words. And there have been threats made online, and that is not okay. I am not trying to justify or sweep that under the rug. You can actually read in the article we're going to put into the show notes the response from the vendor who was targeted and from the space that opened that housed them, and see the full discussion there. What I want to bring people's attention to here and why I wanted to talk about this is, one, this is a time period where it is very easy to panic. In fact, the first time I saw this headline, and it wasn't even a headline at that point, it was just, oh, did you hear about the witch hunt going on in South Carolina? My blood like instantly froze, because the idea of vigilante or mob violence in our current society and culture does not feel outside of the expected. And I started researching and digging into it, as did a friend of mine. And as I have said, as far as I can tell, as of the recording of this episode, no actual physical harm has been done to anyone. But this is how it starts. And this is the phase where we need to nip it in the bud. This is the phase where we have to stand up and stop. I don't care if you are a witch, if you consider yourself a witch, if you practice witchcraft, Wicca, Druidry, any other magical path, if you're just a Christopagan or just a Christian that practices creation spirituality and likes how we talk about creation spirituality here, we have to stand in solidarity with our witchy siblings now and raise our voices and make sure that this does not spread. This case is being highlighted because it was a sermon that led to actual action. They actually went to a venue and harassed people. This is not the only sermon of this type I have seen surfacing recently, because remember, authoritarians need villains. You have to have a villain to keep yourself in power. And there is no greater villain than one that you manufacture on your own, because we have not done the best job at normalizing ourselves to the rest of the population, by which I do not mean taking on the appearance of the general population. I mean, getting people to understand how common it is to meet a druid, a pagan, a witch, that we are just practicing our faith the same way anybody practices their faith, that we are not weird. We're not out in the woods sacrificing babies and all the other nonsense that gets into it. For goodness sakes, so many people still think of witches as a kind of monster. And I hear people say, well, if witches really existed, and I'm just like, what do you mean if witches really existed? I know like 100 witches. Some of my best friends are witches. I periodically refer to myself as a witch, even though I really practice Druidry. Witches are real, though they are still seen as some kind of a folkloric or movie monster kind of a thing. And it is important for us to ensure that people know that, one, witchcraft does exist. Witchcraft is recognized as a proper religion, in that you can actually, if you serve in the military, for example, and you are buried and get a military tombstone, you can actually have a pentacle engraved on your tombstone, because it is one of the recognized faiths by our armed services. So just like a Christian can have a cross, or a Jew can have a Star of David, or a Muslim can have the crescent moon, a pagan or witch can have a pentacle on their official military issued tombstone. So it is a movement, in that we are a people and that we are here, and that this kind of harassment is unnecessary and unwarranted. There are so many myths and legends around the witch that come out of the witch cult hysteria, kind of the first real satanic panic that happened and created the mold for all of the satanic panics that followed, that if we don't speak up when these little things are happening, and to me, this is a major escalation, that it's not just a sermon, that they actually showed up at the venue. And I don't care if it was one or two people or if it was a mob of 100. It is a huge escalation to go from rhetoric to action. And again, I'm not trying to scare anyone. This isn't about being scared. This is about building that solidarity now and doing what we can now to prevent this from becoming a regular occurrence.
Just being knowledgeable about what it is. Once again, because we're fighting against principalities and powers at play here. And this tool of imperialism, this tool of oppression, knowing what it is that you're actually seeing in action, knowing the actual history, can help when interacting with one of the, I guess you could say, agents, maybe even victims of this very thing. Because once again, kind of like with the Greg Locke situation, he was using this tool of imperialism to control his flock, to distract from what he was actually doing.
Yeah.
This is why, for me, the minute I hear a satanic panic or a witch hunt, yellow flag in play.
Yeah, what's really going on?
I instantly put a pause. My hackles go up because I'm just like, what is really going on? What is being covered or obfuscated or distracted from? Is this more like the tradition of witch hunts, where it is some male imperial power trying to control female entrepreneurship and seize their assets?
Which is often what it is.
Often that's actually at the core of it. And even in this case, you could see where he was complaining about, I'm assuming the Wiccan at the market was actually female. I don't remember reading if they stated in the article.
I'll double check.
But I would not be surprised to find out this was a female entrepreneur who is hurting the finances of the church, because by drawing people away from the church is losing money and they're losing control. And so thus lashed out by going witch, so they could then justify attacking this person.
All we know is that they identified themselves as the witch's broom closet.
Okay.
And it does appear that even the venue is trying to protect their identity.
Yeah, but I would not be surprised. Some of the earliest ones were women that were brewing beer for the household and started selling it in the community, and was selling so much beer, they were making a lot of money for their household and threatening the power structure. By declaring them a witch, they could seize the money, they could seize their assets.
Yeah, remember the Salem witch trials, the infamous Salem witch trials, which were not the only witch trials that happened in the United States, by the way. Also, did you know we had vampire hunts in the United States? We did look into what happened in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. For more information on that, we had vampire hunts here too. Salem being the most infamous of the witch hunts that took place here, it primarily targeted wealthy widows and other more elderly senior people and more wealthy people in town that were obstinate to the goals and ambitions of those in power. This is the trend. This is typically how this goes. And for those of you who have not had to engage in this kind of activism before, this kind of self-preservation activism before, it's tricky. And this is where we have to be careful. I'm not here to police anybody's opinions, anyone's feelings, or anyone's reactions to news like this, especially if you happen to be at a location where this kind of persecution is happening. What I can tell you is, one, we will not be saved by respectability. So do not think that we can make ourselves respectable members of the community enough that they will not continue to target us. Respectability politics has not worked for the African American community. It has not worked for the Asian American community or the Cuban community, and it has not worked for the LGBTQIA plus community. It does not work. You cannot garner enough respect that they will not come after you. That is not how this works, and that is not how we have to play this. But also, the weird corollary to that is we have to be very careful about the actions that we take in response, that we are not pouring gasoline on the fire. And this is where things get really tricky and require a lot of strategic planning because, yes, sometimes protests are important. Yes, sometimes action needs to be taken in these situations, but doing everything in our power to ensure that the actions that we are taking are not easily and simply misconstrued. Now, notice how I worded that. Opposition will always misconstrue whatever we do. They'll always find the one person that they can find that says the most awful thing and say, look, they're all doing this, right? That is inevitable, or just taking words completely out of context and trying to gaslight an audience into thinking that we're saying something different than what we are saying. We have no power over that. That's just an inevitability that we just have to prepare for. Okay. But in making sure that we are being careful and cautious in the ways that we respond, in the ways that we act, so that we do not want to make it easy for our opposition to attack us. Right. And this is why, like, during the period of peak AIDS activism, things like the memorial quilt help a lot, but interrupting Easter services, as much as I feel like the Catholic Church deserved the harassment that ACT UP brought to them, it made it much easier to demonize the entire queer population.
Because that is the nuance that's trying to be threaded. The path forward is you must challenge these individuals, these people that have chose to participate with the power principality. You have to challenge them, but you have to do so in such a way that gets them to question their submission to that power principality. And that is such a delicate threading that has to be done. Keeping that in mind, because like with your two examples, the quilt challenges them because they have to face all this death that is happening.
Yeah.
And it makes them question, is it worth it? Like, am I the monster for being gleeful about all this death? Whereas interrupting the Easter Sunday service, yes, it challenged them. It made them face that, but it did so in a way that they can then just go, well, you're a monster for interrupting Easter service.
They don't have any respect for good and righteous society, right?
Yeah,
it
didn't make them question their position. It didn't make them question, like, what are they actually standing up for?
So I'm not saying that these are the tactics we need to take going forward, but in previous Satanic Panics, I remember Coven leaning into the bad witchcraft tropes and showing up at places with the pointed hats, like literally going and buying witch costumes and showing up with a broom in hand to protest, because it makes the opposition look silly. If you do it right, you can make your opposition look silly. That you're going out.
This is where the heavy metal helped with a lot of the silliness of Satanic Panic, because people suddenly went, oh, this is completely silly stage play. It really is. They mocked it mercilessly and really made people question, like, oh gosh, I'm the silly one.
That is kind of the best way to combat this, is to make your opponent look silly and making sure that we're not making ourselves look silly.
Yeah.
In the process. That's the only time where respectability matters in these discussions, is they're going to parody, harass, and attack no matter what we're doing, but we have to not make it easy for them. We need to make it hard for them. And it doesn't mean that we always show up in suits or our Sunday finest or anything like that. But, if they're saying certain things about us, not feeding into those things. I remember when some people were starting to harass a local shop, somebody wanted to make t-shirts that said, "Don't make me sacrifice your babies." And while I find that funny, I laughed. I was like, no, you don't understand that. They think that that's what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
Like, they think we're actually doing that. Maybe we shouldn't do that. And we changed it, and all showed up wearing t-shirts that said, "I put a spell on you," and actually sang that song as a protest song. And it was really funny watching a bunch of evangelicals literally clutching their pearl, as Pearl says there, we're saying, "I put a spell on you because you're my..."
That's why I love the phrase, like, is your God really that weak?
Yeah.
Like, is your God that weak?
The weak God, I think, is one of the more interesting ways to go with this, because if your God is so weak that he could lose a fight with the devil, that your God is not the supreme power.
Yeah.
If you're trying to tell me that your God is the supreme power of the cosmos, but a angel, and not even a divine being, an angel can beat him. And of course, if you really need to take it to that next level and go, well, maybe your God is that weak, there is a passage in the scriptures where Adonai is actually defeated by Shamash, one of the other gods of the pantheon, gets his butt whooped and admits it. That's actually, they forgot to edit that out of the book when they were monotheisming it. So that is actually in there. There's also a passage in the book where God gets his butt whooped by an Akkadian deity, just so you know, if you need some ammunitions. But, be safe. Make sure that you have connections with other people and that you're just keeping check on the atmosphere, what's going on. Because if the Christian nationalists are going to get their way, they need to do something that they've been very bad at. The trans panic that they've tried to instill isn't working. It isn't working, mainly because it's got an easy fix, right? They stated a problem. They don't want men in women's sports. And unfortunately for them, and unfortunately for us as well, legislatures are just like, oh, we can fix this, and just writing laws to discriminate against trans people, which is bad, but it also takes the problem away. They can't keep harping on the problem because legislatures are just saying, nope, you can't do that anymore. We can't have trans women on women's sports teams. So they're going to start looking for other groups that it's going to be harder to go after. They're doing this with drag really hard right now. And in fact, the Supreme Court has said that, Tennessee outlawing drag in the entire state of Tennessee might be constitutional. They're not sure. They're going to have to hear arguments about it. That's spooky. So their targets may be the drag queens, but I feel like this is testing the waters because I'm hearing these terms of pagans and witches getting brought up a lot more. Paula White, who is one of the pastors who works directly with this administration, has been using the terms witches a lot. A lot of the pastors in the inner circle have been using the term witches a lot. We saw in the Pastor Dollinger video that we reacted to earlier in the week that he specifically calls out pagans in there as one of the groups that he's rallying people against. So we just need to be mindful right now. This is like the lowest alert. This is just keep your ears up, keep your head up, keep looking, but know that it does seem like we need to enter that phase because they have transitioned from rhetoric to action. And once that bar gets crossed once, it's easier to cross it the next time. And hopefully it's just going to be people with signs. If we can stop it there, that's a victory. But we know where these witch hunts tend to go. Alrighty, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode, though I don't know how you could have, because this was a dark one. But I'm glad that you are here, and I hope that you are not afraid, but that you are empowered and feel like you have some tools to help you through this. I would love to know your thoughts on what's going on, especially if you know of any other events that we didn't mention here. Please leave them in the comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they do not notify us and they do not let us know. So go ahead and leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and leave a comment there. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars that you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us through the Cash App, hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. That really helps us out a lot. It helps us to keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on the table. So thank you so very, very much. If we've ever done or said anything that's helped you out, please share that with somebody else, because that helps us out more than you know. And as we're heading out, Blessed Brigid of the Judgments, we ask you to stand now in our defense, that you will stand between us and the unjust accusations that come against us, that you will, like you did in days of old, bring justice to those who unjustly accuse and persecute others. Amen.
Amen.